I spent my day saving lives, but when I walked through my front door, I discovered my husband was systematically destroying mine. The key in the lock felt like turning a boulder. Each millimeter of rotation was a monumental effort, a final act of will at the end of a brutal 12-hour shift. My scrubs were stiff with things I didn't want to think about, my shoes squelched with a phantom wetness, and every muscle in my back was screaming a different protest song. All I wanted, all I had fantasized about for the last 4 hours, was to collapse onto the couch, put my feet up, and enjoy 30 minutes of blessed, brain-dead silence before I had to muster the energy to shower and eat. That was the dream. The reality, as always, hit me the second the door swung open. The air was stale, thick with the smell of old takeout and unwashed laundry. A mountain of Mark's clothes had avalanched off the laundry basket and was now colonizing the entryway. I had to sidestep a sticky patch on the hardwood floor that I knew, with the certainty of a seasoned detective, was from a spilled energy drink. And there, enthroned in the center of the chaos, was my husband. Mark was sprawled on the couch, the one I had just been dreaming of. His long legs were propped up on the armrest, and his head was tilted back, eyes glued to the massive television screen. The room was dark except for the violent, flashing colors of the video game he was playing. The metallic clatter of digital gunfire and the guttural roars of some pixelated monster filled the space, a cacophony that grated on my already frayed nerves. He was wearing the same sweatpants and faded t-shirt he'd had on when I left for work at 6 this morning. An empty bag of chips was crumpled on his chest, and a collection of empty cans stood sentinel on the floor beside him. I closed the door, the soft click swallowed by the sound of an explosion on screen. For a full 10 seconds, I just stood there, my heavy work bag digging into my shoulder, waiting for him to acknowledge my existence. Nothing. He didn't turn. He didn't pause his game. He didn't even flinch. It was as if a ghost had just entered the room, a ghost who paid the mortgage. Finally, I cleared my throat, a pathetic little sound. "I'm home," I said, my voice hoarse with exhaustion. Without taking his eyes off the screen, without a single flicker of recognition that his wife, the sole breadwinner of our household for the last 7 months, had just returned from a day of literal life-and-death situations, he spoke. The words slid out casual, entitled, and utterly soul-crushing. "Oh, you're back? Did you bring food?" He didn't even look up once. Something inside me, a little flickering pilot light of hope that I didn't even know was still burning, was extinguished in that moment. It wasn't just the words. It was the complete and utter lack of awareness. The assumption that my return from work was not an event to be acknowledged, but merely a potential food delivery service. For 7 months since the layoff, I had been telling myself this was a phase. He was depressed. He was struggling with the rejection. He needed time to get back on his feet. I'd made excuses for him to my family, to my friends, and most of all, to myself. I'd come home from grueling shifts and cooked dinner while he decompressed from a long day of sending out 3 online job applications. I'd cleaned the apartment on my days off while he researched new career paths, which always seemed to involve watching YouTube videos about day trading or flipping sneakers. I had swallowed my resentment, chewed it down like bitter medicine, because we were a team, and this was just a rough patch. But hearing those words, in that tone, with that absolute disregard for me as a human being, I realized this wasn't a rough patch. This was our new reality. I was no longer his partner. I was his provider, his mother, his maid, and he wasn't even grateful. He was annoyed that I hadn't anticipated his needs better. I looked down at the 2 plastic grocery bags in my hand. They were heavy, filled with the ingredients for the shepherd's pie he loved, the one I had planned on making despite feeling like I could sleep for a week. I had even picked up his favorite craft beer, a little treat to try and lift his spirits. The weight of the bags suddenly felt unbearable, a physical manifestation of my burden. I walked past him and into the kitchen, dropping the bags on the counter with a thud that was louder than I intended. He still didn't react. The gunfire from the TV was relentless. I stood there for a moment, my hands gripping the edge of the cold granite countertop, just breathing. In and out. I felt a strange calm settle over me, an icy stillness that pushed the exhaustion and the anger into a tight, dense ball in my stomach. I wasn't going to cry, I wasn't going to scream, I was done with all that. I pulled out my laptop from my work bag, setting it on the small kitchen table. I needed a distraction, something mundane to focus on before I did something I would regret. I'd pay a few bills, sort through some emails, a normal, boring adult task. I logged into our joint bank account, the one my paycheck flowed into every 2 weeks. The account from which all our bills, the mortgage, the car payment, the utilities, the groceries, his video games, were paid. I was just going to pay the credit card bill when I noticed something odd about the balance in our joint savings account. It was our emergency fund, our new roof, new baby, new life fund that we had both solemnly sworn never to touch unless the sky was literally falling. I had transferred my annual bonus into it 3 weeks ago, bringing the total to a little over $10,000. It was the one thing that made me feel safe, a little cushion against the world. But the balance on the screen wasn't 10,000. It was 8. I frowned, my heart starting to beat a little faster. Maybe a bill was accidentally paid from the wrong account. It had happened before. I clicked on the account details, my eyes scanning the list of transactions. And then I saw it. A withdrawal. A cash withdrawal from an ATM made this afternoon at 2:17 p.m. for $2,000. $2,000 gone while I was holding a dying man's hand and telling his family he was at peace. My eyes shot from the laptop screen towards the living room, where the only sound was the triumphant music of a level being completed, and a single horrifying question burned through my mind. What did he need $2,000 in cash for? The triumphant fanfare from the television was a mocking soundtrack to the blood roaring in my ears. $2,000 in cash. My mind, trained to triage and assess, immediately started running through the possibilities, each one darker than the last. Gambling debt? Drugs? Something illegal that would explain the need for untraceable funds. Every scenario felt both wildly implausible and terrifyingly possible. This man on my couch, this stranger wearing my husband's face, was a black box of secrets. I pushed away from the counter, my movements stiff and deliberate. I walked into the living room and stood directly in front of the television, blocking his view. The glow of the screen painted me in shifting shades of blue and orange, an avenging angel in surgical green. "Hey, I was in the middle of a boss fight," Mark complained, craning his neck to see around me. "Turn it off," I said. My voice was unnervingly level, devoid of any emotion. It was my code blue voice, the one I used when panic was not an option. He must have heard something in my tone because he finally, for the first time since I'd come home, actually looked at me. His brow furrowed in annoyance, not concern. "What's your problem? I just got this new expansion pack." "Mark, turn off the game. We need to talk." With an exaggerated sigh, he fumbled for the controller and the screen went black, plunging the room into a heavy silence, punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerator. He squinted at me, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. "Okay, I turned it off. What's so important it couldn't wait?" I crossed my arms, the fabric of my scrubs crinkling. I was paying bills. I noticed a $2,000 cash withdrawal from our savings account. It was made this afternoon. His expression shifted. The annoyance was still there, but it was now overlaid with a thin, brittle layer of defensiveness. He broke eye contact, looking down at the controller in his hands. "Oh yeah, that. It was an investment opportunity." "An investment opportunity?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "What kind of opportunity requires a $2,000 cash withdrawal from an ATM?" "It's complicated," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "A friend of a friend is launching a startup. It's an early buy-in, super high yield potential. Had to be cash for tax reasons. You wouldn't get it." The condescension in his voice was a lit match in a room full of gasoline. I, who managed our entire household budget down to the last penny, who had negotiated the interest rate on our mortgage, who had spent years learning complex medical terminology, wouldn't get it. The lie was so flimsy, so insulting in its lack of effort that I almost laughed. "What's the friend's name?" I asked, my voice still quiet. He shifted on the couch. Dave. You don't know him." "And the startup? What does it do?" "It's tech stuff. App development," he stammered, his eyes darting around the room, landing on anything but me. He was drowning, and he knew it. "Mark," I said, taking a step closer, Look at me. Look at me and tell me you took our emergency money, the only safety net we have, and gave $2,000 in cash to a guy named Dave for a tech startup." He finally looked up, his jaw set in a stubborn line. "Why are you interrogating me? It's our money, isn't it? I'm trying to make something happen here, trying to get us back on track, and all you can do is question me. Don't you trust me?" Trust. That word hung in the air between us, poisonous and absurd. Trust him? I trusted him to leave dirty dishes in the sink. I trusted him to forget to take out the trash. I trusted him to play video games for 12 hours straight while I held our lives together. The anger I'd been suppressing finally broke through the ice. It was hot and sharp, and it demanded action. My eyes scanned the room and landed on his backpack, slung carelessly on the floor by the couch. He'd taken it with him when he left this afternoon, telling me he was going to the library to work on his resume. Another lie. Before he could react, I lunged forward and grabbed the backpack. "Hey, what are you doing? Get out of my stuff!" he yelled, scrambling up from the couch, finally showing some energy, but I was faster. I unzipped the main compartment and dumped its contents onto the floor. A half-eaten bag of jerky, a crumpled hoodie, and a large, sleek, black box. I knew that logo. It was from a high-end electronics brand. I picked up the box. It was heavy. On the front, in gleaming silver letters, were the words, "Valkyrie X Pro Gaming Laptop." I turned the box over in my hands. Taped to the back was the receipt from a big box electronics store, dated today. The total came to $1,799.99. My knees felt weak. It wasn't a debt. It wasn't a drug deal. It was a toy. A brand new, top-of-the-line toy. He had looted our future, our security, for a better way to ignore his life. The sheer, breathtaking selfishness of it stole the air from my lungs. "An investment?" I whispered, holding up the box. "An investment in what, Mark? Getting to a higher level?" His face went pale. "It's not just a toy. I can use it to learn skills. Graphic design, video editing. It's for a new career." The excuses poured out of him, desperate and pathetic. I wasn't listening. My gaze had fallen back to the pile of his things on the floor. Tucked into the front pocket of the hoodie was another, smaller receipt. A slip of paper from a different store, a jewelry store, in the same mall as the electronics store. My stomach twisted into a knot of pure dread. My hands shaking, I knelt and picked it up. It was for a necklace, a sterling silver chain with a custom-engraved heart pendant. Purchased today. My breath hitched. He felt guilty and bought me a present? Was this his twisted idea of an apology? But as my eyes scanned down to the bottom of the receipt, to the description of the custom engraving, the last bit of air left my body. The world tilted on its axis, and the floor seemed to fall away beneath me. The engraving wasn't for me, and the name on the receipt, etched into my brain as surely as it was etched onto that silver heart, was Chloe. Chloe. The name echoed in the silent, suffocating space of my living room. It wasn't a name I recognized, not a cousin, not a friend's new baby, not a character from one of his games. It was a stranger's name, and it was engraved on a silver heart that my husband had bought with our emergency money. The laptop, the lie about the investment, all of it was just a smokescreen. The real betrayal was this little slip of paper in my hand. It was proof of a second life, a secret world he was living while I was at work, trying to keep ours afloat. My vision tunneled. The room, the mess, Mark's panicked face, it all blurred at the edges. The only thing in focus was the receipt, the damning black and white text. The laptop was an insult. This was a demolition. He hadn't just stolen our money. He had stolen our past and torched our future. "Who is Chloe?" I asked. The question came out as a hollow whisper, a sound from a great distance. Mark's face, which had been pale with guilt over the laptop, now turned the color of ash. He looked like a cornered animal. His mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. The bluff, the bravado, the lazy entitlement, it all evaporated, leaving behind a pathetic, frightened man. It's not what you think," he finally managed to stammer, his eyes wide and pleading. "She's just a friend. I was just helping her pick it out, for her sister." The lies were getting more desperate, more insulting. He thought I was that stupid. He thought after everything I would swallow this pathetic see-through fabrication. The icy calm I had felt earlier returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't about suppression anymore. It was a razor's edge. I stood up slowly, the receipt still clutched in my hand. I held it out to him. Her sister, right. And what about the laptop, Mark? Is that for Chloe's sister too? Is she also a budding graphic designer? "No, the laptop is for me, I told you," he insisted, his voice rising in panic. "The two things are not related." "They are related," I said, my voice dangerously low. "They are related because they were both purchased today with $2,000 that you stole from our joint savings account. Money I earned. Money I put away for an emergency, like the furnace breaking or one of us getting sick. But I guess a new toy and a gift for your girlfriend count as an emergency now." "She's not my girlfriend," he shouted, taking a step towards me. I took a step back, my hand instinctively going to the heavy work bag still on the kitchen table. I suddenly felt unsafe in my own home. "Don't you dare lie to me again," I hissed. "I have spent the last 7 months working myself to the bone. I come home so tired I can barely see straight, to a filthy house and a husband who can't even be bothered to look up from his video game. I cook, I clean, I pay every single bill. I have defended you, made excuses for you, and supported you. And you repay me by stealing from us to buy presents for another woman?" Tears were starting to well up, hot and angry, but I blinked them back fiercely. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not yet. He ran his hands through his greasy hair, his entire body thrumming with nervous energy. Okay, you want the truth? She's a girl I met online, in the game. We just talk. That's it. She's been having a hard time, and I wanted to do something nice for her. It was a stupid mistake buying the necklace. I shouldn't have done it. I'm sorry. You met her in the game, I repeated flatly. So, while I was saving lives, he was living a fantasy one. He was building a new relationship, a new connection, right here in our living room, funded by my labor. The image of him laughing and flirting into his headset while I cleaned up his messes made me physically ill. And the laptop? Was that to impress her? So you could play with your online girlfriend with better graphics? It's not like that. You're twisting everything, he said, his voice cracking. I was going to tell you about the laptop. I needed something for myself. Something that wasn't just sitting around here, waiting for you to come home and be disappointed in me. His attempt at playing the victim was the final straw. The dense ball of anger in my stomach exploded. I saw red. I wasn't thinking. I was just reacting. A culmination of months of suppressed rage and exhaustion. I turned on my heel and marched into the kitchen. I grabbed the grocery bags from the counter, the shepherd's pie ingredients, his favorite craft beer. I walked back into the living room, right up to the massive 65-inch television that had been his constant companion, his portal to Chloe. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion and a new kind of fear. I didn't answer. With a guttural scream that felt like it was clawing its way up from my soul, I swung the first bag. A 1-pound package of ground beef connected with the screen with a sickening thud, leaving a greasy smear. The carton of eggs was next. I hurled it with all my strength, and it exploded in a shower of yolk and shell. Then came the beer. I twisted the cap off the first bottle and emptied its contents over the top of the TV, the amber liquid dripping down the screen and into the vents. I did the same with the second and the third. I was a machine of destruction, fueled by betrayal. Mark just stood there, his mouth agape, watching in stunned horror as I systematically destroyed his most prized possession with the very food I had bought to nourish him. When the bags were empty, I threw them to the floor and stood there, breathing heavily, my chest heaving. The room smelled of beer and raw meat. Egg yolk dripped slowly down the darkened screen. My eyes met his across the ruined living room. The fear in his face was gone, replaced by a dark, simmering rage I had never seen before. He looked at the television, then back at me. "You're crazy," he whispered, his voice shaking with fury. "You're completely insane." He took a menacing step toward me. But I wasn't finished. The calm had returned, cold and absolute. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I dialed my brother, a police officer. "I'm not insane, Mark," I said, my voice as steady as a surgeon's hand as the phone began to ring. "I'm just getting started." I looked him dead in the eye, my own reflection staring back at me from the smeared, dark screen of the television. "Now, about that investment opportunity, I think it's time we talk about fraud." Mark froze. The word fraud hung in the beer-soaked air like a guillotine. His rage faltered, replaced by a dawning, stark terror. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew my brother, David, was a cop, and he knew David had never liked him, not from the moment we started dating. David's dislike had always been a simmering background noise in our lives, something I'd dismissed as overprotective big brother syndrome. Now, it felt like a lifeline. "You wouldn't," Mark whispered, the threat draining from his voice, leaving only a desperate plea. "Sarah, don't. It's a misunderstanding. We can fix this." A calm, detached voice answered on the other end of the line. "David." "Hey, Dave," I said, my eyes locked on my husband's. "Sorry to call you on your night off, but I have a bit of a situation here." Mark started shaking his head frantically, mouthing, "No, please, hang up." I ignored him. "I'm at the apartment. There's been a theft. $2,000 was taken from my savings account without my authorization. I believe my husband, Mark, made the withdrawal." I could hear David sit up straighter on the other end. His relaxed, off-duty voice sharpened into his professional cop tone. "Okay, Sarah. Are you safe? Is he there with you now?" "I'm safe. He's here," I said, never breaking eye contact with Mark, who now looked like he was about to vomit. "Don't do this, Sarah," he begged, taking a half step forward, his hands outstretched. "We're married. It's our money. They'll tell you it's a civil matter." "It's a joint account, David," I continued into the phone, deliberately speaking over Mark's frantic whispers. "But I can prove he took the money under false pretenses. He told me it was for a specific joint benefit investment, but he used it to purchase personal luxury items for himself and a gift for another woman. He effectively defrauded me. I want to press charges." On the other end, David was silent for a moment. Then, "Okay, stay on the line. I'm 5 minutes away. Lock yourself in the bedroom or the bathroom. Do not engage with him." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, a strange sense of power surging through me. For the first time in months, I wasn't tired. I wasn't sad. I was in control. "I'll see you in 5. I hung up and placed the phone on the kitchen counter behind me. The silence in the room was absolute now, thick and heavy with the wreckage of our life. The smell of stale beer and raw beef was nauseating. Mark just stood there, staring at me, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. The reality of what I had just done was crashing down on him. This wasn't a fight anymore. This wasn't a dramatic argument we would get over. I had crossed a line. I had invited the outside world, the world of consequences, into our messy, broken home. "You called the cops?" he said, his voice barely audible. "You called the cops on your own husband?" "I called them on a thief and a liar," I replied, my voice hard. "You stopped being my husband the moment you decided your video games and your online affair were more important than our future. You stopped being my husband when you looked me in the eye and lied about it." "It's not an affair," he shrieked, the panic returning full force. "I've never even met her in person. It's an escape. You don't understand how hard this has been for me." I let out a short, sharp, humorless laugh. "Hard for you? You think this has been hard for you? Try working a 12-hour shift on your feet, dealing with literal death, and then coming home to a second full-time job of taking care of a grown man-child. Try feeling the weight of every single financial responsibility on your shoulders, while your partner spends his days in a fantasy world. Don't you dare talk to me about hard." The wail of a distant siren began to cut through the night. It grew steadily closer, a sound that for me usually meant another emergency, another tragedy to clean up. Tonight, it sounded like salvation. Mark heard it too. His eyes darted toward the front door as if he was contemplating a run for it. He looked back at me, his face crumbling. The anger, the fear, the desperation, it all melted away into a pathetic, pleading whimper. "Sarah, please, tell them it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I'll take the stuff back tomorrow, I swear. I'll get the money back. Don't do this to me. It'll ruin my life." "You ruined your life, Mark," I said coldly, stepping aside as the blue and red lights began to flash through our living room window, painting the egg-smeared TV in horrifying strokes of color. "I'm just filing the official report." A loud, authoritative knock echoed on the front door. "Sarah, it's David. Open the door." I walked to the door, my shoes sticking to the floor. Mark didn't move. He was a statue of despair in the middle of our ruined living room. I opened the door to see my brother in his uniform, his partner standing behind him, both with grim, professional expressions on their faces. David's eyes flickered past me to the scene inside, the trash TV, the mess on the floor, and Mark standing amidst it all. His jaw tightened. "He's all yours," I said, stepping back to let them in. David and his partner entered, their presence immediately changing the entire dynamic of the room. This was no longer a domestic dispute, it was a crime scene. As David began to calmly and professionally question a completely shell-shocked Mark, asking him for his version of events, I felt a strange sense of detachment. It was like watching a scene from a television show. The man they were talking to was a character, and I was just an observer. David's partner, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, turned to me. "Ma'am, would you be more comfortable giving your statement down at the station?" I shook my head. "No, I'm fine here." I wanted to watch this. I needed to see it through to the end. I recounted the whole story from the moment I got home to finding the receipts. I showed her the laptop box, the damning slips of paper. As I spoke, I noticed something else on the floor near where I had emptied Mark's backpack. It was his wallet, which must have fallen out with the rest of the contents. It was lying open. Tucked into one of the clear plastic sleeves wasn't a family photo or a picture of me. It was a small, folded piece of paper. Driven by a grim curiosity, I bent down and picked it up while David was busy reading Mark his rights. The casual way he recited the familiar words was chilling. I unfolded the paper. It was a printout of a bus ticket confirmation, a one-way ticket to a city 3 states away. The departure date was for this upcoming Saturday. There were 2 tickets, one for Mark and one for a passenger named Chloe Miller. Beneath their names was the confirmation for a motel room, booked for a full week, already paid for. It had all been paid for with a credit card, a card I hadn't seen before. I didn't recognize the name of the bank, and the last 4 digits were unfamiliar. He hadn't just stolen our cash. He had opened a secret credit card in his name, and who knew what else. This wasn't just a gift. This wasn't an online flirtation. This was an exit plan. He was going to take the laptop and run away with our emergency money to start a new life with his online girlfriend. He was going to leave me with an empty apartment, an empty bank account, and a mountain of debt. And he was going to do it this weekend. He wasn't just leaving me. He was planning to completely disappear. The bus ticket confirmation felt like a block of ice in my hand. He was going to disappear. This Saturday. He would have waited until I left for my weekend shift, packed his new laptop and his clothes, and just vanished. I would have come home Sunday night to an empty apartment and a wiped-out bank account. The sheer cold-blooded calculation of it was breathtaking. The lies about the investment and the job search, the lazy act on the couch, it was all a cover. He wasn't depressed. He was plotting, biding his time, bleeding me dry until he was ready to make his escape. My brother finished handcuffing Mark, who was now weeping openly, pathetic sobs that held no remorse, only self-pity. "David," I said, my voice cutting through the room. It was quiet, but it held a new authority that made both cops and my sobbing husband turn to look at me. I held up the bus ticket and the wallet. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was planning to flee. He booked a bus ticket for this Saturday for himself and the woman, Chloe Miller. And he paid for it, and a motel room with a credit card I've never seen before. He's been opening secret lines of credit. David's expression hardened into granite. He took the papers from my hand, his eyes scanning them quickly. He looked at Mark, his face a mask of pure disgust. Well, looks like we've got credit card fraud and a flight risk on our hands." He turned to his partner. "Add that to the report. Larceny, fraud. This just got a lot more serious." Mark's head snapped up, his eyes wild with panic. "No, Sarah, it was a fantasy, a stupid game. I wasn't really going to go. I love you. I was just lost." "Lost?" I stepped forward, finally closing the distance between us. I looked down at the man who was once the center of my world, now kneeling in handcuffs on our dirty floor. "You knew exactly where you were going, Mark. 3 states away, with a woman you met online, funded by my sweat and my future. You weren't lost. You were a parasite, looking for a new host." I turned my back on him. I couldn't look at his face anymore. I walked over to David. "What happens now?" "We take him downtown for processing," David said, his voice softening slightly as he spoke to me. "Given the flight risk and the additional fraud charges, he won't be getting out on his own recognizance. He'll have to post a significant bail, which I doubt he can do. You'll need to come down tomorrow and give a formal, signed statement, and you'll need to call your bank and the credit card companies first thing in the morning." He put a hand on my shoulder. "You should also call a lawyer, Sarah, a divorce lawyer." I nodded, feeling a strange and profound sense of peace settle over me. Divorce. The word didn't scare me. It sounded like freedom. They led Mark out of the apartment. He didn't say another word to me, just stared at the floor as they walked him past the wreckage of his gaming shrine. The front door clicked shut, and the flashing blue and red lights swept across the room one last time before disappearing, leaving me in silence. I stood alone in the center of the mess, the smell of stale beer and betrayal hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, I felt the exhaustion of the past 7 months, the past 12 hours threatening to crush me. But then, a different feeling began to surface. It was a fierce, bright, and utterly unfamiliar feeling of lightness. The weight I had been carrying, the burden of his unemployment, his unhappiness, his deception. It was gone. He was gone. The next few weeks were a blur of action. I filed for divorce immediately. I froze our joint accounts, filed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus, and spent hours on the phone disputing the charges on the secret cards Mark had opened. It turned out there were 3 of them, with a combined debt of over $12,000 in gaming subscriptions, takeout food, and cash advances. Armed with the police report, I fought every single charge. I was relentless. I hired a cleaning crew to deal with the apartment. I couldn't bring myself to touch the sticky, smeared television or the mountain of his laundry. They came while I was at work, and when I returned, the apartment was spotless. The broken television was gone. His backpack, his games, his clothes, all packed into boxes and stacked neatly by the door. It felt like my home again. It felt clean. Mark's parents called me, begging me to drop the charges. They offered to pay back the money. I listened politely and then said, "I'm sorry, but this isn't about the money anymore. It's about the fact that he was going to abandon me and leave me in financial ruin. The consequences are his to deal with." They didn't call again. I sold the couch he had spent the last 7 months on. I sold his gaming chair and his ridiculously expensive headset. I used the money to buy myself a new, smaller, more comfortable sofa and a beautiful, oversized armchair. I placed it by the window where I could read in the morning sun. I filled the space where the giant TV had been with bookshelves. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Mark, facing multiple felony fraud charges, took a plea deal. He got probation, a hefty fine, and a criminal record that would follow him forever. The judge stipulated that his fine payments would go directly to me as restitution. The court ordered him to collect his belongings, and David escorted him to the apartment one last time. I was at work. I left his boxes outside the front door. When I came home, they were gone, and my key was on the mat. That night, I came home from another long shift. I unlocked the door to my quiet, clean, peaceful apartment. It smelled like lemon and fresh linen. I dropped my bag, took off my shoes, and curled up in my new armchair with a cup of tea. There was no blaring television, no passive-aggressive silence, no sticky floors. There was just me. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like more than enough. It felt like everything. I had faced the ugliest truth of my life, and instead of letting it break me, I had cleaned up the mess and built something new, something that was entirely my own. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peace.